Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 IoT Trends Driving Strategic Innovation hosted by Link Labs. We'll get started in just a few minutes as we give people a chance to continue to log in. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining Link Labs 2022 IoT Trends Driving Strategic Innovation. We're about 1 minute before the top of the hour, and we're going to wait till about 1 minute after just to give people a chance to join in and log in, but we'll be starting shortly. Thanks. Thanks for joining, everyone. We're going to be starting in about 1 more minute. All right, welcome everyone to 2022 IoT Trends Driving Strategic Innovation, hosted by Link Labs. I'm Jennifer Halstead, the Chief Financial Officer, and I'm happy to moderate today's discussion. Before we get started, we'd like this to be somewhat interactive with the audience today, so feel free to send in your questions related to each trend in the questions box, and we'll try to answer those as we go through each trend. If it's something we will address later in the presentation or a more general question, we'll have additional Q&A at the end of the presentation. We're also recording today's presentation, so if you'd like a copy after the fact, you can also have that made available to you. Your hosts today are Bob Proctor and Stas Wolk. Bob Proctor is the co-founder and CEO of Link Labs, a leading provider of an end-to-end IoT platform for tagging, locating, and monitoring equipment, supplies, and assets anywhere at any time. With a PhD in applied physics and 25 years of entrepreneurial and business leadership, Bob is also a founding principal of Blue Venture Investors, a venture capital investment company that supports early-stage entrepreneurs in the Mid-Atlantic region of the US, which gives him a unique point of view on a wide range of emerging technologies and their novel applications and potential market viability. Bob, we're glad to have you today.
Thank you, Jennifer.
All right, Stas Wolk is the Chief Operating Officer here at Link Labs, a wireless telecommunications industry veteran with more than 20 years of executive leadership experience. Stas has a wide breadth of knowledge in sales and business development, strategic partnerships, and operations management. Stas has been front and center at the dawn of the wireless industry since the early 90s, spending 6 years as a VP GM at PageNet, 5 years with Research in Motion, maker of BlackBerry, and 2 years as the COO with Datalink, a leading wireless application services and software solutions provider, delivering end-to-end mobile data management applications to business enterprises. Stas, welcome as well.
Thank you, Jennifer.
All right, Bob, we'll let you start it off with the agenda.
Yeah, let me jump right in here. So today we want to talk first a very brief introduction to Link Labs so we can provide a little bit of context around our experience, what we do, and how that might shape our view of trends. Generally, our trends are perspective developed by interacting in the market with both partners on the supply side, on the distribution side, as well as with many, many companies across multiple industries. So just a brief 2-slide introduction, then we'll jump into the trends, kind of the meat of the presentation here. There are 6 we'd like to talk about, everything spanning from digital transformation and how that's becoming more critical, supply chain challenges, which gets a lot of press these days, what's happening with asset tracking, and thinking about the breadth of use cases and what's evolving on the technology landscape. Thinking about asset tracking in terms of sort of disposable one-way asset tracking versus returnable assets, and then some new business models that we're starting to see with some clients, and it really starts to talk to just how critical this is to the survival of some industry players. We'll wrap up with a brief solution overview on AirFinder, which is our flagship product suite, and we'll get into some sort of wrap-up thoughts and Q&A. Again, as Jennifer mentioned, feel free to submit questions via the Q&A area in GoToMeeting. She'll try to pull out ones that we can answer sort of as we go along, so we can make this as interactive as possible. We have a very large number of attendees today, so it'd be impossible to unmute everyone and still maintain any semblance of order. So we'll take questions through the chat box and have Jennifer kind of synthesize them and blow them in. So with that, let me jump into the Link Labs intro. Just a quick snapshot. We were founded in 2014. Our core team actually worked in IoT type asset tracking and monitoring solutions on the engineering side for probably a decade before the founding of Link Labs. So a long history working in this space. We have 2 core products, one AirFinder Onsite, the other AirFinder Everywhere. You can think of Onsite as a campus-based large footprint facility type solution. And AirFinder Everywhere is, as its name implies, allows you to have geographically distributed or even internationally distributed tracking and monitoring capabilities, all in one platform. We have deployed over a couple 100,000 devices. We process about 1 billion events per month. We are working with tier 1 partners, both on the supply side and distribution side on a global basis. We're north of 60 employees and have about 30 patents. So it gives you a sense of kind of our scale. We've been operating at scale. We have a number of companies that we work with that are operating at scale and have a fair amount of experience here. Our solution has been fortunate enough over the last year and starting with this year as well to win many awards that are internationally recognized. These are competing against lots of different products. You'll see awards for the AirFinder Super Tag. That is sort of the core product, if you will, for AirFinder Everywhere, or the core tag. And you'll see awards here for AirFinder Onsite. Again, that's our campus-based or large footprint facility solution that allows indoor tracking to meter level accuracy. Our software platform has won awards as well. We're really proud of what we've been able to develop over the last 6-7 years, and the industry recognition we're starting to receive. So with that, let's get into the heart of the webinar and trends. And I'm going to turn it over to Stas to talk about the first one.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. And we'll sort of ping pong back and forth a little bit here. There's actually 6 trends that we're going to go through. This first one we've labeled digital transformation and criticality. And I feel I'm being a little Captain Obvious when I talk about the pandemic disruptions throughout the global economies being a trend driver, but COVID has really exacerbated some of the other issues that were really already impacting and transforming how we do business in a number of ways. For example, the baby boomer demographic and what that population bubble is doing to the labor market, the related emergence of opportunities in other markets that we're seeing in areas like assisted living. There's also very clearly a pretty high stress point right now in the labor market, with the demand for talent becoming highly competitive and really outpacing the supply. We've got inflationary pressures that are further driving up the cost of labor, labor efficiency, and the whole notion of really needing to do more with less people, as right now especially it's very difficult to replace for attrition, not to mention what the temporary gaps in the available personnel do to overall production capacity, and the time and effort required to train new personnel, and how long it takes them to become as fully productive as, say, a more tenured employee. So all of this is creating further push towards increased levels of automation, and the need for quality underlying process data, for example, is really enabled by IoT solutions. Of course, with all of this economic activity taking place, there's a tremendous increase in consumer demand, but also in demand volatility. So supply chain shortages, new product introductions, seasonality, general seasonality, these all create all sorts of bubbles in the operational throughput demands, and the ability to flex labor up and down is even more strained today than ever before. All of this is driving demand and implementation for all kinds of innovative solutions. And again, IoT is an important enabler really for many of these approaches. Ultimately, I think it's all about visibility. So visibility in your processes, visibility in where your materials are, your finished goods, your people, your other assets and tools. Where is everything and how is it flowing and moving and performing, giving visibility to bottlenecks, visibility to conditions or parameters that going out of range to what normal expectations would be. So things like inventory or production dwell times being exceeded, or temperature limitations being violated, or asset flow not moving the way it's meant to move. So we're showing here a group of problems, not all inclusive, and a group of solutions or positive impacts that IoT can provide and deliver.
Yeah, and Stas, I'll jump in. I think the key point here is that we don't believe that this is a short-term or a kind of a hump that will go back to kind of pre-COVID days. And the retirement boom is a retirement boom has been accelerated. Consumption patterns have shifted from services to more material goods. That may ease back, but probably not to the same level. What's happening in the labor markets is not changing. And so the notion of digital transformation, while it might have been a thing that people were piloting or playing around with kind of pre-COVID, what we're seeing with many clients that we're working with is that it is mission critical to success today to help address some of the labor productivities, find out where process bottlenecks are from either production or distribution perspectives. They need data. Where are the problems before they can even start to address this? And IoT offers that ability to not only gather the data, but also we're at a level of maturity from a solutions perspective to provide the analytics and the workflow integration to really capture the benefits of that information. So we're seeing this, I guess, moving from nice to have or something you pilot to mission critical to success, given the new world.
Yep, that's exactly right, Bob. I think as we, in the past, we've seen people really take IoT from a science project perspective, and now they're really realizing it's critical to their operations and their efficiencies. We don't have any questions on trend number 1 right now, so you want to move to number 2?
Sure, and I'll lead this one. So supply chain challenges, just to dig a little bit deeper into that. What we're seeing is a level of complexity and challenge today that's really highlighting the need for increased visibility. If you don't have real-time visibility, you're trying to make phone calls in this kind of time of disruption to all the different stakeholders in the supply chain. Well, they're getting hit with all their other partners, and it's just a volume that's unmanageable or untenable. So there's just basically an inability to provide information, track down information, find things. So step 1 is there's just an incredibly heightened need for increased visibility. But beyond that, you start to see opportunities and use cases to start resolve some of those challenges. So you can find where bottlenecks are, where things are getting shipped to the wrong place. We see stuff getting sent to the wrong suppliers, and it's just orphaned there. So there's a lot of different things that can be done to start to capture various use cases and key needs, and start to eliminate pain points as you kind of move down this journey with basic solutions. And then ultimately a more comprehensive solution is where these efforts typically evolve, where you have an IoT solution that suddenly is giving you a leg up on the competition. And what we tend to see is in these times of disruption, companies that solve problems faster than others tend to capture more market share. And so if there's if you're in a particular industry and there's, the market leader and the number 2 player, number 3 player, number 4 player, in stable times, that kind of order of leadership in an industry tends to stay pretty stable as well. In times of disruption, that's when that industry leadership often gets reordered. And so we're seeing a number of companies start to recognize that this actually, as much as it is a threat and a problem, it's also an enormous opportunity by pushing hard and fast to implement solutions for visibility in the supply chain, resolve issues faster, and win market share, and sort of restructure the industry leadership. So any thoughts there, Stas or Jennifer?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to this is, we talked about climbing the rungs of the ladder, so to speak, and we kind of view this, and I think the way a good IoT partner engages with a client is a bit of a journey, a mutual journey that you go down. And you sort of see some of the elements there, and the implementation part is you could actually break that down even further, and that's a critical part of the journey. And that's where sometimes these implementations are, should we say, likely to fail, or possible to fail, or fail to scale. And if you've got to make sure that you're executing correctly during that implementation phase. And even that we break down, typically for example, would do something. You start off with a bit of a POC, and then you move into more of a pilot program, maybe in a site, before you ultimately go to an enterprise-wide deployment that could span, multiple sites and even multiple geographies. But it really is a journey, and the speed with which you go through that journey, that the need right now is to accelerate that as much as possible. So to the extent you can leverage off of previous experiences and expertise with the various partners involved, I think that's very important as well. So
I've got one question coming in about how logistics companies would be able to use IoT. So as we're talking about supply chain challenges, do you have any thoughts on a use case for how this would apply to logistics?
Yeah, we've actually got some, that's going to play into some of the later slides. So unless you've got something you want to answer immediately, Bob, I was thinking hold off until we start talking about new business models and so forth.
Yeah, and I think we have another trend on sort of returnable versus one-way asset tracking, which will start to get into the logistics space, because you can bifurcate the logistics space into goods like carts and totes and crates and those kind of things that flow in loops that suddenly can become IoT platforms, versus just sort of one-way distribution. And there are fundamentally different business models and economics associated with those. So we'll come back to that in trend number 5 and 6.
How can IoT implementation help mitigate future supply chain disruptions?
I think the answer there is it's as much about visibility. A lot of times people think of a supply chain disruption as fundamentally being driven by your supplier just doesn't have enough components, but there are also disruptions during the actual delivery from point A to point B, particularly if you look at a complex supply chain of parts to an OEM that may be doing a subassembly that goes through some distribution capability, maybe even transoceanic shipping to another final assembly facility that then gets shipped to somebody else who's reaggregating, sort of depalletizing and repalletizing, for different customers, right? So when you look through that broader definition of supply chain, having real-time visibility into where everything is starts to allow you to identify, and basically predict bottlenecks and problems, and start taking and pulling forward actions to address those issues, and or just to simply call up somebody in the supply chain and say, actually our goods are stuck in your facility and I can see where they are, and avoid some of the back and forth. So the visibility can really help identify and predict where constraints are. The other areas is within the monitoring capability of IoT. If you think about measuring temperature, for example, in cold chain distribution or shock, looking for breakage or out of bounds, it's really critical to identify that you're going to have defective product or likely defective product because of some damage event in the supply chain, so you can start the mitigation process that much sooner.
Sounds good. Let's go to trend number 3.
On to number 3, and I'll shift this one back to Stas.
Sure. So so asset tracking, or what I recall used to be under the umbrella of location-based services, or LBS. It's been around for 20 years, but where it could be applied to was limited really by the cost to deploy and maintain these solutions, and the underlying economics of the value that's being delivered. So the good news is that the costs have really come down while market volumes have exploded, while the recognition of the benefits of asset tracking has increased, and at the same time capabilities really have improved through all kinds of technology innovation. So for example, we're especially proud of and excited about our XLE technology and what that delivers beyond Bluetooth low energy capabilities, where we can deliver location precision up to around a meter with tremendous battery life, and for a fraction of the cost of, say, an ultra wideband solution, where maybe you don't need centimeter level precision, but at the same time plus or minus 1 beacon of accuracy just isn't good enough. So with XLE, we can deliver up to 1 meter there, sometimes even a little bit better than that. And that just really opens up a bunch of new market opportunities. It also opens up the aperture for use cases and potential markets and industries where asset tracking can and is now being deployed, where previously you'd only see tagging very high value assets. Suddenly it's beginning to make economic sense to be able to track and locate say tools or bill of materials parts in a manufacturing facility, especially if you've already invested in your IoT infrastructure for some other use case or application, because the tag cost is so much lower and the size or form factor is much more amenable to be attached to, say, a calibrated torque wrench, because you're looking at a tag the size of a postage stamp that's maybe no more than 5 millimeters thick. That's available today, and in the future we'll be able to get even smaller with the tag size without sacrificing battery life. Since the battery size is really the long pole in the tent that's driving tag size. So now all of a sudden we're looking at deployments much more broadly in warehousing and logistics. We're leveraging infrastructure investment in the hospitality industry that was initially supporting stop alert solutions, and now we're moving on to do things like tracking luggage carts and room service trays, and even wayfinding in larger hotel and resort complexes. And recently we've even seen a lot of new activity around county elections boards for tracking elections equipment and other related assets. By the way, the other thing I would mention that's happened with this industry and use case expansion is the associated user experience, from the UI to reporting and workflows and back-end integration, which now has a far less reliance on customization and the associated costs with that, as well as the overall speed of the deployment and any disruptions that come along with that. Yeah. So we've listed some of the benefits of asset tracking and monitoring there at the bottom of the slide.
Yeah, and I'll jump in. I think democratization is a purposely chosen word here on this slide. The cost, as Stas has mentioned, have really come down in this market significantly. If I go back, say, 5 years to today, it's just night and day. Infrastructure costs have probably dropped by 50 to 75%, and tag costs have dropped a good factor of 2 or more, just given the operational life. If you think of the total lifetime cost of a tag that's being used for a long time, we've seen battery life being extended by factors of 3 or 4. The availability, what that means is, with much lower cost infrastructure, lower cost tags, and tags that monitor things like temperature, the number of use cases that become viable under the umbrella of some installed infrastructure, as Stas was mentioning, the hotel hospitality example, the number of use cases grows really dramatically. And so instead of a point solution, we'll touch on this a little bit in the next trend, you're starting to see that this infrastructure can be leveraged across many use cases, and the ROI becomes much more immediate and dramatic. Jennifer, questions there?
We've been talking about cost of tags. Do you have range of tag costs for different technologies? And then how is that cost expected to reduce over time?
Yeah, when we see you've got for real-time tracking, where you're getting, I call it Uber-like visibility versus FedEx-like visibility. Uber, you see a dot on a map and you can see your driver approaching you in real time. So what Link Labs is focused on is this sort of real-time visibility, because that's what enables that transformation. Choke point technologies like barcodes, that's your FedEx experience. It checked out of the distribution center at 4 or 5 a.m. and it'll show up sometime in the next 12 hours, but you cannot see it like a dot on a map like Uber. So in the real-time tracking arena, there are really two broad swaths of technology, Bluetooth-based and ultra-wideband. Ultra-wideband has much higher chipset costs, as well as basically oscillators, and so the fundamental cost drivers on the hardware side are much higher than Bluetooth. It's also not manufactured nearly in the volumes that Bluetooth is. Bluetooth is, cranking out 4 billion plus chipsets a year. Ultra-wideband is a small fraction of that, and they're more complicated, more expensive. The lowest price point I've seen for an ultra-wideband tag with long operational life is around $30. The lowest price point I've seen for a Bluetooth-based tag is in the $3 to $5 range for a very small sort of coin cell operated tag. We are partnering with printable battery Bluetooth enabled tags, and even energy harvesting Bluetooth tags. So I think you'll see for some disposable one-way asset tracking use cases, sub $1 Bluetooth tags someday. Not necessarily useful for long operational life applications like tool tracking in a facility, but again, we're getting 4 times the operational life now out of a postage stamp size tag. I can tag a screwdriver, a crescent wrench, and have it last 3 to 5 years, and I can find it within a meter in a manufacturing site. That wasn't possible a year ago. So we're seeing Bluetooth to be anywhere between a factor of 3 to a factor of 10 less expensive than ultra wideband on the tag side. Yeah, so hopefully that helps answer that question.
Sounds good. Let's move to trend number 4.
All right, so we just touched on this briefly, but if you think about the price point coming down for infrastructure, the breadth, again, we work primarily in the Bluetooth space because there's a very wide array of SKUs that are readily available. We put our own proprietary software in some instances, but not all, on those tags. But there are many, many different SKUs of temperature monitors and shock detection capability and form factors for simple tags, personnel badges versus industrially hardened tags that can, stand an enormous amount of physical abuse. Historically, what we've seen is kind of more of a bottom-up emergence of, hey, I have a pain point. I need to track some aspect of what's happening in my production facility. So if I take a large discrete manufacturer, if I flash back 2-3 years ago, we would have a manufacturer say, I'm mostly interested in tracking the materials flow because that's where I think my problem is into my factory. And I've got these carts that are transporting bulky items, and I don't know where the carts are, or I'm moving from a offsite down the road warehouse facility to my production floor. I want to understand, are all the right parts getting to the production floor on time? And that would be the kind of inquiry in the use case that they would be looking to acquire. And then we'd talk to a different manufacturing company, and they'd say, well, my issue is tools and calibrated instruments, and we have these specialty tools and instruments that get left out on the production line and then I put back in a consolidated area, and then people go looking for them, and that can be disruptive to our production process. So that would be a different point solution in the manufacturing. And then somebody else would say, well, I'm really interested in work in process tracking. I've got some bottlenecks in some of my workstations, and I don't really have an understanding of the dwell time of work in process in each station and how that varies depending on shift or other things that might be happening within that workstation, and why there's a variability in the efficiency of a given workstation. So I'm interested in work in process tracking. And somebody else would come to us and say, I'm interested in finished goods and inventory monitoring in my distribution area. And what we're seeing now is companies come to us saying all of the above. We need an extensible solution that allows us to get a comprehensive view on all the production inputs and the production flow with the proper reporting and analytics around that. We're looking to digitally transform our production capability to make it both more efficient from a labor productivity perspective, but also just improve throughput because we're fundamentally constrained. And so I'm interested in, again, all above: work in process, tools, calibrated instruments, materials flows, understanding what personnel are in what zones at what times, particularly if I have contract workers for certain areas, understanding, how much finished goods inventory do I have, et cetera. So we're seeing this sort of extensible solution strategic push coming from much higher levels in an organization today. People are recognizing the value of IoT much more than in the past. Stas, I'll let you jump in here with additional thoughts.
Oh, I thought that was pretty complete. So
Yeah, all right, there we go. Jennifer, we have questions here, or should we move on?
We do not. We can move on.
Oh, I feel vindicated for having covered that so thoroughly. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Stas for number 5.
trend number 5. Okay, so this is an interesting one, and it builds on some of the themes that I think we've already been discussing. So first of all, when we talked about the democratization of asset tracking, we mentioned that as the cost of the technology has come down, it's become more viable to track items of lower and lower value. So now there are market needs for both returnable assets, which, by the way, gives you the opportunity to recover and reuse the tag, or simply continue to monitor that same asset without any additional touch time, but also for one-way asset tracking, where the tag, excuse me, is essentially it's a sacrificial device that, again, delivers that visibility that the underlying asset, that it made it to wherever it was supposed to go, and perhaps that it didn't exceed environmental condition constraints. So this requires a low-cost tag, but the battery can be much smaller, which also helps with both the cost and the form factor. On the returnable asset side, this captures a number of reusable assets like pallets or carts or totes or other types of shipping containers or fixtures. Now you're able to reliably track these types of assets, and you're able to support monitoring their flow through a logistics loop that may begin with the manufacturer or the producer going to a distributor, to a retailer, and even a customer, and then back to, say, a 3PL or some sort of replenishment facility, and then back to the producer to restart the loop all over again. So this closed loop approach, it certainly isn't novel, but now we have the ability to provide a much greater level of visibility into the state of the assets in this loop, identifying bottlenecks and slippage, really reduce waste and increase efficiency overall, and enable a process that may not make sense without this type of visibility.
Yep, and Stas, I'll jump in here. I mean, what we're saying here is that we're seeing the market kind of bifurcate between one-way asset tracking and returnable assets. And in the one-way asset tracking, you're really just driving to disposability and low cost, right? And the more you drive down the cost curve, what we start to see is you move from a crate full of goods level to say, I've got these 10 things on this crate, and that crate went somewhere, so I'm assuming those 10 things are there too. I want to track at the package level, to ultimately I may want to track at the item level. So things like wine and spirits, you would be looking at disposable tags, at a pallet level, then at a case level, then at an individual item level, and that's where that world is going. Smaller batteries, more and more disposability, lower and lower costs. The returnable side is going towards really long operational life, in turning a returnable, a plastic pallet or a tote that may be flowing from a food distributor to a grocery store, back to a cleaning facility, and then back to the food distributor. Those items are becoming IoT platforms, where you're enabling tracking and environmental condition monitoring, and maybe associating items on that with the with the container. So I can say I'm associating, even with something as simple as a barcode scan, this crate or tote has these items on it, and I can watch them flow around. And when the tote is cleaned and flowing back to the original or origination facility, there's a reassociation. But you're looking for really long operational life, long-lasting batteries, more industrial hardening, those types of things. And from a platform perspective, both of those have to be supported. And you get to a level of sophistication of platform around, what tags get, basically purged from the system, and how does that work versus which ones are, continuously monitored and managed. And when you have, tens or hundreds of thousands of these, that becomes a problem in and of itself.
We've got some specific questions. Can you describe the technology behind how you can trace something over its entire life cycle? So from the container to the truck on the road to its final destination. How does that work?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. We utilize something which we call a super tag that has multiple technologies embedded in it that are configurable from the cloud to the use case. So I can break those technologies into sort of indoor location capability and backhaul, and then that further breaks into facilities that I control versus facilities that I don't, and then also outdoor over the road location capabilities and backhaul. Let me start on the outdoor and over the road location capabilities and backhaul. So with that, there are actually 4 different types of location determination capability that is embedded in a super tag. Everybody's familiar with GPS, but we also can use cell tower ID. It's a cellular enabled device using what I call the purpose-built IoT cellular technologies from the network operators. LTE-M is predominant here in the US, and NB-IoT can be in some other countries. So we can, determine based on just the cell tower that it flowed through that it's probably on a certain delivery route, for example, without needing to know much more. And then in addition to that, there's something called Wi-Fi sniffing, where you're looking for the Wi-Fi IDs. You're not actually connecting to Wi-Fi, but you're looking for IDs. And there are public and private databases that allow you to figure out where you are based on what Wi-Fi networks are near you. And then there's the AirFinder piece, basically. So you can deploy as little as one Bluetooth beacon that you know where it is, and you set that up in the system to, on the indoor infrastructure side, you can deploy many Bluetooth beacons and track something seamlessly indoors. The indoor piece for facilities you control, it's very similar to just a Bluetooth tag backhauled through a purpose-built network that provides coverage and backhauls those Bluetooth capabilities. And then there's enough smarts and processing on the tag to actually figure out if it's inside what we call an AirFinder network or over the road. If there's no cellular connectivity for a period of time, it will buffer its location and then pass that up. But typically, there's also the ability to add multiple carriers on a single device through electronic SIMs and those kind of things. So enormous amount of sophistication, I guess, in terms of varying degrees of location capability and backhaul capability, both indoors and out, to provide as much connectivity as possible and the location accuracy that's necessary for the use case at hand. And the reason we use all these different location technologies is because they are fundamentally very different in terms of how much power they consume. So the device calculates its power consumption with every type of transaction it performs and is configurable to last until certain periods of time and operate on motion versus after motion stops. So there's just a lot of knobs that are built into allowing that kind of visibility to take place through a distribution chain.
What's the average battery life for those returnable asset trackers?
It depends again, on the use case. If you want to know where something is every minute, not very long. If you basically say, well, I only care about a delivery route and that it stopped at all 12 stops or 15, and it's after motion stops, it can be many years. But in general, for a typical distribution case, and for we have two, actually there's three different tags of super tags at this point. There's a rechargeable one, but setting that aside for just a battery one, you're looking at 1 to 3 years for the smaller one, and probably 5 to 7 years for the larger one. Kind of like again, I'm going to call it the quote typical use case.
One other capability I think I'll just add in there, Bob, when we were talking about the super tag is the thing with the super tag is it's a larger device. It's more expensive as a result of that, but it can also function in a sort of a digital leash type of capacity, what we call the super tag as a hub, where you can take that larger super tag device, you can attach it to a pallet or some sort of a shipping container, and then we can put Bluetooth tags, which are much smaller, much less expensive, on individual packages or boxes or whatever that are sitting on that pallet, and they create an association with that super tag. So not only via that association can they essentially provide location information outside of an indoor infrastructure out in the wild, so to speak. But they have the backhaul capability to report that through the super tag. So that's another capability that we're able to bring to the market that really helps in these logistics types applications.
Sounds good. I want to be sensitive to time. So let's go to trend number 6.
All right.
I think that's you, Bob.
Sounds great. So, if you start to think about this visibility capability, what we're starting to see, and it's pretty exciting, is the emergence of new business models. The way I like to think about this is risk. And I'll give an example in food distribution to sort of bring this home. Food spoilage is a huge cost in food distribution. And typically a business model today involves a supermarket, for example. They purchase food from a supplier, and whatever they don't sell that spoils is waste. So they're accepting that risk, and that's sort of part of their economics. That also means that they have the ability to shop between many suppliers to figure out who they want to obviously get supply from. And so suppliers at the same time are constantly concerned about the fact of getting sort of losing a contract and suddenly real lumpiness and demand from what they can supply. So fundamentally the issue is if you had visibility and complete knowledge of where food was, how much was being sold somewhere, where disruptions and delivery may mean out of stock situations, you can start to manage that risk at a fundamentally different level than today. So what we're seeing is some food distributors are actually now contracting where a supermarket, for example, will only pay for what they sell. And so the food supplier is taking the risk of food spoilage. And they're doing that because they have complete visibility into what is where and what needs to be delivered where. So they think they can manage down that risk with visibility, and that changes the business relationship now between the supplier and the supermarket. Where the supplier takes on the risk, it changes the economics. It also is a very sticky relationship once you shift that risk from one industry player to another. And so you're in a different business model. So what we're seeing is, a company that starts to embrace a new business model, they're going to lock up a segment of the market, and again, obviously the goal is to then, win a larger market share. So we're seeing this emergence of new business models in part by taking risk that is mitigated through this increased visibility. So that's one example, and there are certainly others. It can be in things as shipping racks and containers becoming leased assets is a good example historically, and we're seeing that migration as well, where a company can afford to lease them because they don't lose track of where they are, and they don't lose them. And so leasing models with reuse, start to grow. And so companies that maybe have purchased these items themselves may try to free up that capital and find a partner that's willing to actually rent them to them. So again, visibility provides the ability to manage risk, which means you can change the economic model and business relationships, and typically those business relationships become much more sticky. So why don't I pause there?
No questions, Stas? Any comments there?
No, just to reiterate the fact that quite often we talk about location information, where stuff is, where it's been, tracking that. There's also the value of the sensor information as well. So obviously, and I think you referred to this, Bob, when we were talking about temperature monitoring, particularly in a grocery type of environment, and mitigating the risk associated with spoilage, but also identifying when and where, shall we say, that deviance from whatever temperature parameters you're trying to adhere to, where that actually and when that actually took place, so that you can recover from a cost perspective on the at-fault party, so to speak.
Good. Sounds good.
I'm gonna finish again with just a little bit of a wrap up on Link Labs. So we certainly are available to support anyone here in thinking about how they might be looking for a comprehensive solution that works sort of indoors, outdoors, over the road, through the example here, OEM to over the road to a distribution center, over the road again to a reseller, over the road again, many stakeholders. And provide real-time visibility and an integrated solution. So we can certainly support this type of capability. We have a core product, a component of our product suite is AirFinder OnSite. This is really, think of this as large footprint facilities for indoor asset tracking. Again, Stas mentioned earlier, to the meter level. It's done in 4 simple steps here, from tagging your assets. We set up something we call location beacons that provides the location information to the tag, and then access points provides backhaul capability. Gateway aggregates all the access points, and all the information is put together through a cloud-based IoT platform that provides you the analytics and reporting and integration capabilities for other systems that you may need. AirFinder everywhere. We talked about this with the super tag. There's a couple pictures there on the upper right of that capability. I'm confident this is probably the most robust tracking piece of technology on the market today, in terms of just the level of sophistication of blending many technologies that allows it to be configured and optimized for a wide array of use cases.
And a soon to be added rechargeable version that's even smaller than the smaller of the two that you saw
there. That's right.
Previous picture.
Yeah, let me wrap up with some final thoughts as people gather their last questions. So I think what we've talked about today really is a couple things. One is the urgency for digital transformation is undergone a step change due to all that's happened in the sort of macroeconomic context, with labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, connected work, etc. Changes in consumer and consumption patterns. So the urgency is super high. We are seeing the affordability of this technology to be much greater. So the good news is while the urgency is higher, the affordability hasn't been better. And the ability to support a breadth of use cases under that affordability umbrella means that this can be more transformational. And therein lies the opportunity to really think about transforming a business either from an efficiency perspective and gaining competitive advantage, or from a business model perspective in reassessing risk or commercial and economic relationships. So there's some significant acceleration of the importance of IoT and asset tracking and monitoring today over the last 18 months or so. So why don't we stop there and take any final questions, Jennifer?
Sounds good. One trend we didn't talk about today, but is definitely a lot of noise in the market, is around 5G. And so how do you think the rollout of 5G will impact IoT?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are multiple subcomponents to that question, if you will. 5G has a component that addresses machine-to-machine and IoT capabilities. It also has a component that's simply about latency and bandwidth. And most people think of 5G and they think of connected car, for example, or the ability to walk down the street while sort of downloading a video. So in the pure backhaul piece of 5G, say it's a gateway that we provide or a modem and a super tag, you'll see this technology involved to embrace that, just by upgrading the modem that's in a device or in a gateway. I think the hype in 5G is way ahead of the reality of the network capabilities. As a company, Link Labs was the first company to have CAT-M or the LTE-M capabilities available 4 or 5 years ago, first company with certified products on Verizon's network. But I would say the marketing hype from network operators is probably a good 2+ years ahead of the reality of that capability. So I'd say 5G is coming. From a backhaul perspective, it's frankly readily adopted on our product roadmaps. On the machine-to-machine side, we're seeing, we're actually partnered, we'll have a webinar coming up in another 6 or 8 weeks with a Bluetooth mesh company called Wirepass, where we'll talk about the 5G capabilities on indoor infrastructure and how we're basically integrating with that to provide and leverage the 5G capabilities for what you might call private network capabilities. So, good news is what we're doing today slots right into a 5G world as that world unfolds. So there's no need to wait, if you will, to get going.
Something else that's important to our customers is information security. Can you talk about how that is as a trend in the area, and then how Link Labs addresses that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything is end-to-end encrypted with what we do. We actually operate a separate IoT network in large footprint facilities. And most, in fact, I'd say pretty much all the customers and clients we work with, are thrilled to not increase the surface area of potential attack vectors into their core information systems, but to rather have a purpose-built, encrypted, with state-of-the-art encryption techniques, IoT network layer that sits outside of their core IT or OT infrastructure has been a real driving factor for adoption of this kind of capability. So, just touches on it. And then there's, of course, all the other standard IT security things you would do from a cloud software perspective.
Sounds good. And then just finally, can you talk about how an ROI model is important to implementing an IoT solution?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a business guy fundamentally, so an ROI model, it boils down to, Jennifer, you're a CFO, right? If there's an ROI, you tend not to do something. So, um, building those models is critical. I think this is where the affordability really matters. I like to think of it as, if you think about the return on investment, the investment side has, basically three broad buckets of drivers. One is the cost of infrastructure. Second is the cost of installing that infrastructure. And then the third is the cost of tags. Maybe there's fourth on the, ongoing software as a service, capabilities. The infrastructure costs and the tag costs have dropped way down. And also, like we failed to mention earlier on the services side, our solution, for example, can be installed without any labor that's, certified electricians, that kind of stuff. It's all low voltage wire, plug and play, can be done by a non-technical resource in a fraction of the time that these things used to take. So the service to actually just get something up and running is a fraction of what it used to be as well. And then if the operational life of a tag goes from 6 to 9 months to 3 years, and you're looking at amortizing that across 3 years instead of 6 months, and the replacement cost of tags every 6 months, suddenly the value you need to be generating is a lot smaller to make the math work on providing value to the organization than ever before. So we can work with a single facility, for example. If you've got a multi-plant network, we start with a single plant and show the transformation that's possible there, and build a business case to then take it corporate wide.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add to that, Bob, is sometimes we find that there's one particular use case that's driving the initiative, and from an expense perspective, that can really be loaded up because you've got to build in all of the infrastructure. And the good news is that sometimes that will stand, the business case stands on itself just for that one initial business case. Not always, but quite often it does. But then as you expand beyond that and begin to introduce other use cases under the same IoT umbrella, the incremental cost is significantly reduced, and that's where you can really deliver some long-term value, beyond what that initial use case deployment is.
Yep. Yeah, I know we're at the top of the hour, but
yep, we're at the top of the hour. So thank you, Stas and Bob, for answering all these questions and just providing your insights on the trends. If anyone would like a demo or more in-depth about use cases, feel free to provide your phone number in the questions section, and we'll reach out to you and schedule a demo. I'm going to deep dive into some of that information for you. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.